The crystalline dome of the Galactic Council's grand chamber reflected the pale light of 3 moons, its normally serene atmosphere shattered by panicked voices and the harsh glow of emergency holograms. Councillor Vexthorian's translucent tentacles twisted in distress as another defensive line collapsed under the Varaxian assault. Impossible, the ancient Zentheri whispered, his bioluminescent patches pulsing with anxiety. The 7th Fleet's formations were perfect. Their tactics followed every protocol in the Strategic Codex. Admiral Mason Drake kept his face carefully neutral, a skill honed through years of serving as humanity's covered observer within the Council. He watched the holographic display as the neat, orderly lines of Council warships crumbled before the savage efficiency of the Varaxian swarm. The Council's perfect warfare doctrine, developed over 10,000 years of peace, was falling apart against an enemy that didn't play by their rules. "The Varaxians have adapted to pattern defense delta," announced the fleet commander, her crystalline form flickering with distress patterns. "They've developed countermeasures to our standard response protocols." Drake suppressed a smile. Of course they had. The Council's obsession with standardization and perfect, predictable warfare made their tactics as transparent as the chamber's walls. They fought like an algorithm, and the Varaxians had simply calculated a solution. The holograms shifted, showing the fall of Centauri Prime. The planet's orbital rings, once proud symbols of Council engineering, now burned as the Varaxian fleet methodically dismantled the defense grid. Council ships maintained their precise formations even as they were torn apart, their commanders too indoctrinated to consider deviation from approved tactics. "The defensive fleet at Proxima has been destroyed," reported a junior aide, their usually melodious voice cracking with fear. "The colony worlds of the Outer Rim are requesting immediate evacuation." The chamber erupted in chaos. Various council members proposed increasingly desperate solutions, each one rigidly adhering to the strategic codex that had failed them repeatedly. Drake noticed young Zentheri diplomat Sixel fidgeting in the corner, her iridescent scales flickering with nervous energy. "Honored Council," she finally burst out, breaking centuries of protocol. "There might be another option." The chamber fell silent, all eyes and sensory organs turning to the junior diplomat. Even the emergency holograms seemed to dim. "The species from the galactic fringe," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "The ones we denied membership due to their unpredictable nature." Drake's heart raced, but he maintained his passive observer's pose. He'd waited 3 years for this moment. "The humans." Councillor Vexthorian's tentacles writhed in shock. "They're barely out of their solar system. Their technology is primitive, their methods chaotic. They still used physical controls on their ships." "Exactly," Zixel pressed. "The Varaxians have adapted to our standardized combat protocols because they're predictable. But the humans," she gestured to a data screen, pulling up footage from humanity's membership application trials. "They'd modify their ships mid-battle. They improvise weapons from damaged systems. Their tactical doctrine appears to be try everything until something works." The chamber watched in horrified fascination as the recording showed a human corvette turning its own reactor breach into an improvised weapon. Drake remembered that incident. Captain Rodriguez had called it a spicy surprise for the evaluation team. "This is madness," the fleet commander protested. "Their ships violate 13 different safety protocols. Their chaos drive technology defies rational physics. And the Varaxians have never encountered anything like them," Zixel countered. "How can they calculate a response to an enemy that doesn't calculate?" The chamber erupted in argument again, but Drake noticed the subtle shift in tone. Fear of defeat was beginning to outweigh fear of chaos. He touched his concealed communicator, sending a pre-prepared message earthside. "Protocol wildcard is in play. Request diplomatic package. I told you so. Be prepared for delivery." Councillor Vexthorian's tentacles finally settled into the pattern indicating resignation. Perhaps we should send a delegation, merely to evaluate our options." Drake smiled. The council was about to learn why humanity's application had included the warning, "Don't call us unless you're ready for things to get weird." The council delegation's ship emerged from hyperspace expecting to find a primitive solar system dotted with chemical rockets and basic orbital platforms. Instead, Chief Engineer Kelvor nearly had a seizure as his sensors tried to process the quantum shipyards stretching across Luna's crater-pocked surface. "This is impossible," he chittered, his crystalline exoskeleton vibrating with distress. Their membership application showed no signs of quantum manufacturing capabilities. "That was 3 years ago," Admiral Drake replied with a slight smile. "We get bored easily." The delegation's vessel approached Luna Station, passing massive construction bays where ships of distinctly human design took shape. Each vessel violated at least a dozen council engineering principles, their hulls bristling with modifications that Kelvor's sensors categorized as potentially catastrophic design choices. The station's docking procedure involved what the council species considered unnecessary theatrics: magnetic grapples, rotating airlocks, and actual human operators instead of AI systems. Commander Zixel watched in fascination as a repair crew performed maintenance by physically climbing along a ship's hull, using tools that combined advanced energy manipulation with what appeared to be simple percussion techniques. "They're hitting it with hammers," Kelvor observed in horror. "Advanced quantum machinery, and they're hitting it with hammers." "If it works, it ain't stupid," came a cheerful voice over the comm. "Welcome to Luna Station, Council Delegation. Captain James Anderson speaking. I hear you folks are in need of some unconventional problem-solving." The delegation was escorted to Observation Deck 7, where they got their first view of the UES Thermopylae. The warship hung in lunar orbit like a challenge to conventional physics. Its hull incorporated elements of salvaged alien technology, modified human innovations, and what appeared to be improvised repairs that had somehow become permanent features. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" Captain Anderson stood at the viewport, his weathered face reflecting pride as he gazed at his ship. The captain's uniform bore non-standard modifications that would have given any council military official an aneurysm, including what appeared to be manually added pockets and non-regulation armor plating. "Beautiful is not the word I would use," Kelvor managed, his sensors struggling to categorize the ship's power systems. "Your main drive. These readings can't be correct." "Ah, you're picking up the chaos drive," Anderson grinned. "Yeah, she runs on weaponized probability. Technically, the ship is in 17 different dimensions at once, but we only use about 7 of them for actual propulsion. The rest are for storage and the occasional tactical surprise." The delegation watched in stunned silence as a crew member demonstrated the ship's emergency maintenance protocols, which seemed to involve rerouting power through systems they weren't designed for, physically modifying equipment on the fly, and keeping a supply of what Anderson called emergency duct tape in every compartment. "This morning we borrowed some Centaurian phase technology and integrated it with our point defense systems," Anderson explained, pointing to a recently modified turret. "Added about 40% to our targeting efficiency, though it does occasionally shoot 5 minutes into the future. We're working on that." Modified alien technology without proper safety protocols?" Zixel asked, her scales shifting between fascination and horror. "Safety protocols," Anderson laughed. "Half our best innovations came from asking, 'What if we tried?' followed by 'oops,' followed by 'hey,' that actually worked better." The Chaos Drive itself started as a failed coffee maker experiment. The tour continued through the ship's interior, where the delegation witnessed crew members casually handling radiation levels that should have been lethal, operating in gravity conditions that violated council comfort standards, and maintaining a surprisingly extensive collection of what they called emergency improvised weapons. "And this," Anderson said proudly, patting a mysterious device cobbled together from at least 3 different alien technologies, "is our backup engine. We call it Murphy's Law Engine, because if anything can go wrong, it will, so we might as well weaponize that principle." As the delegation prepared to leave, Kelvor turned to Admiral Drake. "This ship breaks every rule in Council space. Its very existence offends rational engineering. Its crew appears to operate on principles that defy standard logic." Drake nodded. "Exactly. And that's why the Varaxians won't know what hit them." "You did what to the cafeteria?" Admiral Drake's holographic image flickered with interference as the Thermopila's makeshift communications array struggled to maintain connection through the battle damage. Captain Anderson shrugged, casually brushing debris from his shoulder as another impact rocked the ship. "Converted it into a missile factory. Turns out those food synthesizers were just molecular assemblers with limited programming. Lieutenant Rodriguez figured out how to override the safety protocols. Those were designed to make sandwiches. And now they make missiles. Multitasking is important in combat situations." Anderson turned to his crew. "Speaking of which, how's our latest batch coming along?" Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez gave a thumbs up from her position at what used to be the salad bar. "Just finished another dozen, Captain. They're not pretty, but they'll ruin someone's day. Use the spare coffee maker parts for the guidance systems." The Thermopylae had been serving with the Council fleet for exactly 6 days when the Varaxian ambush struck. 3 hours into the battle, their conventional weapons were depleted, the main engine was operating at 20% capacity, and the Council ships were retreating in perfect orderly formation, leaving the humans to their clearly suicidal defensive action. "Status report," Anderson called out as he made his way through the organized chaos of his bridge. Crew members worked with practiced efficiency, despite half of them operating equipment that had been other equipment just hours ago. Main reactors holding at 40%, which is technically impossible. Chief Engineer Matthews reported cheerfully from beneath a console. "I've got 3 teams rerouting power through the water recycling system. Turns out it makes a decent cooling array if you ignore all known laws of thermodynamics." Weapons. Conventional weapons depleted. Lieutenant Commander Hayes reported from Tactical. "But we got 37 improvised missiles ready in the cafeteria. The point defense system is now firing superheated coffee as a plasma weapon. And engineering just turned our radiation leak into what they're calling a spicy area denial system." Anderson nodded approvingly. His crew had taken to combat modifications like ducks to water. The Council observers who hadn't fled in terror were documenting everything with a mixture of horror and fascination. "Sir," Sensors Officer Park called out. "Varaxian heavy cruiser approaching on Vector 317. They're adapting to our previous evasion patterns." "Of course they are." Anderson grinned. "Time to show them why humans don't believe in patterns. Helm, initiate combat maneuver Delta Charlie Foxtrot." "The one we made up yesterday, sir." "That's the one." The Thermopylae performed what could only be described as a tactical backflip, using its damaged port thruster as an improvised brake. The maneuver violated several laws of physics, 3 Council combat regulations, and what most species would consider common sense. "Cafeteria missiles loaded in tubes 1 through 5, Rodriguez reported, though Tube 3 is technically a repurposed waste disposal chute. "Whatever works, Lieutenant. Target their primary reactor housing and fire when ready." The missiles, assembled from spare parts, food synthesizer components, and what Anderson would later describe in his report as bits we had lying around, streaked across space. The Varaxian ship, programmed to defend against conventional Council weapons, failed to recognize the jury-rigged projectiles as a threat until they detonated. "Direct hits," Hayes whooped. "Their reactor containment is failing. Sir, I think we just started a chain reaction with our spicy area denial system. All hands brace for creative physics," Anderson called out as the Varaxian ship began to break apart in ways that suggested several dimensions were involved. The resulting explosion created 3 new types of radiation, temporarily turned a small portion of spaceplate, and caused every Council sensor in the sector to require recalibration. The Thermopylae emerged relatively unscathed, though the paint on one side of the hull now glowed in the dark. "Damage report?" Anderson asked, picking himself up off the deck. The good news is we've discovered 4 new principles of quantum mechanics, Matthews reported. The bad news is we're going to need more coffee makers. In the Council Command Center, the tactical AI attempted to classify the battle it had just witnessed, suffered what could only be described as a nervous breakdown, and had to be rebooted 3 times before it would stop trying to deny reality. Admiral Drake just smiled. Welcome to human warfare, gentlemen. We're just getting started. Welcome to Operation Pinball, Captain Anderson announced to the assembled council commanders, gesturing to the holographic display of the Helios asteroid field, also known as Why Humans Shouldn't Be Left Unsupervised with Gravity Manipulation Technology. The alien commanders watched with growing concern as Anderson's crew calibrated their newly modified gravity projectors, salvaged from the wreckage of their last battle, and improved with what the engineering team called special sauce modifications. The Varaxians have established their defensive line here. Anderson pointed to a cluster of red markers. They're expecting us to follow standard council doctrine, establish a containment perimeter, and engage in methodical ship-to-ship combat. That is the appropriate tactical response, Commander Vexthar stated, his tentacles twitching nervously. Any other approach in an asteroid field would be suicidal. Suicidal is just another word for exciting. Lieutenant Rodriguez chimed in from her station, where she was programming targeting solutions that made the ship's AI mutter prayers in binary. Instead of fighting them directly, Anderson continued, ignoring the council commander's growing distress, we're going to turn this entire asteroid field into what humans call a game of pinball. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, explain the physics. Hayes stepped forward, sporting a grin that made the alien observers instinctively back away. We've modified our gravity projectors to create controlled cascades. One properly aimed asteroid hits another, which hits another, and so on. Like a cosmic game of pool, but with rocks the size of mountains and explosions for extra fun. The council commanders watched in horror as the human crew began their preparations. The Thermopylae speakers blasted what Anderson called appropriate gaming music, something about another one bites the dust, while Engineer Matthews calibrated the gravity projectors to frequencies that made several alien sensors spontaneously reset themselves. This is madness, one of the council observers whispered. The mathematical variables involved. That's why we're not doing math, Anderson replied cheerfully. We're doing something far more dangerous. We're winging it. The Thermopylae moved into position, its modified systems humming with power that shouldn't have been possible according to several laws of physics. The Varaxian fleet maintained their perfect formation, their tactical computers calculating every possible approach vector based on standard council combat doctrine. They're not even considering we'd try this, Hayes noted with satisfaction. Their threat assessment protocols don't include crazy humans playing pool with asteroids. Fire control ready, Rodriguez reported. Gravity projectors charged to 115% capacity. That's impossible, a council engineer protested. You cannot exceed maximum capacity. Watch us, Matthews called from engineering. We're about to exceed several other impossible things too. Might want to hold on to something. Anderson took a moment to appreciate the perfect setup. The Varaxian fleet, the strategically positioned asteroids, and his crews barely contained enthusiasm for what was about to happen. Lieutenant Rodriguez, start our game. Call your shot. 8-ball, corner pocket. Rodriguez grinned, activating the gravity projectors. What followed would be classified in council records as Tactical Anomaly Event 247, and in human records as, that time, we turned space rocks into the galaxy's deadliest game of pool. The carefully modified gravity beams struck their target asteroid with precision, sending it spinning into a perfectly calculated collision course. The Varaxian fleet's commanders watched in confusion as a single asteroid approached, their tactical computers assuring them it posed no significant threat. Then that asteroid struck another and another, creating a cascade of impacts that transformed the entire field into a maelstrom of spinning rocks and destructive energy. Want to see something really cool? Anderson asked the stunned council observers as the chaos unfolded. "Watch this. Hayes, activate the resonance pulse." The thermopylae released a carefully tuned energy wave that caused the fragments of destroyed asteroids to detonate like massive bombs, creating a chain reaction that rippled through space. The Varaxian fleet's perfect formation dissolved into panic as their ships tried to evade the impossibly complex pattern of destruction. When the dust settled, the Varaxian fleet had been reduced to scattered remnants. The asteroid field had been rearranged into what Rodriguez swore was accidentally shaped like a smiley face, and the council observers were having what Anderson would later describe as a collective existential crisis. And that, the captain announced proudly, is why humans never got good at chess. We prefer games where you can change the rules mid-play. This is no longer a warship, Chief Engineer Kelvor declared, his crystalline form vibrating with distress as he surveyed the Thermopyla's engine room. It's a monument to everything that should not be possible. Engineer Matthews grinned as he welded a piece of salvaged Varaxian tech directly onto their Chaos Drive housing. Impossible is just another word for hasn't been done yet. Watch this. We figured out how to combine their quantum field generators with our probability matrix. The demonstration that followed caused 3 of Kelvor's sensor crystals to crack and his universal translator to start speaking in limericks. The modified drive system now existed in what Matthews cheerfully described as quantum superposition with a dash of spicy randomness. On the bridge, Captain Anderson reviewed the latest modifications to his increasingly unique vessel. The Thermopylae had evolved far beyond its original design, sporting an array of improvised weapons and systems that made council engineers wake up screaming. "Status report on the new installations," Anderson asked, sipping from a mug that read "Chaos is just opportunity in disguise." Lieutenant Commander Hayes gestured to his tactical display, which now incorporated holographic elements salvaged from 6 different alien species. "The good news is we've successfully integrated the Varaxian shield modulators with our point defense system. The bad news is it sometimes generates temporal echoes." Temporal echoes. Yeah, occasionally we blow up enemy ships 5 minutes before we shoot at them, playing havoc with the causality sensors, but the targeting accuracy is amazing. Rodriguez piped up from her station, where she was programming what appeared to be a musical battle sequence. "Sir, the psychological warfare package is ready. I've loaded the entire collection of Earth's classic rock into the enhanced communications array. Current playlist is set to Highway to Hell." The Varaxians seemed particularly disturbed by guitar solos. The ship had earned a fearsome reputation among the enemy. Varaxian battle doctrine now included specific protocols for encountering the vessel they called the Mad Oracle, named for its inexplicable ability to be exactly where it shouldn't be, doing things that shouldn't be possible. "Captain," Sensors Officer Park called out, "We've got incoming. 3 Varaxian heavy cruisers, attempting to flank our position." Anderson's grin widened. "Perfect timing. Matthews, how's our special surprise coming along?" "Ready to test the atmospheric vent maneuver, sir. We've got the leak patterns calculated for maximum thrust, and I've added some fuel mixture to make it extra visible. Should look like we're bleeding fire." The Thermopyla's latest innovation involved deliberately venting plasma in controlled patterns, using the ship's own damage as a weapon while broadcasting heavy metal music on all frequencies. The psychological impact of a warship that appeared to be burning while playing Earth music had proved surprisingly effective. "Sir," Hayes reported with barely contained excitement, "the Council ships in our battle group are requesting our tactical data. I think they're finally starting to appreciate human innovation." Indeed, several Council vessels had begun mimicking human tactics, though their attempts at controlled chaos tended to be more controlled and less chaotic than intended. One Zenthari captain had attempted to modify their weapon systems and ended up creating what they described as a very aggressive tea maker. "Varaxian ships entering weapons range," Park announced. "They're using their standard attack pattern Delta." "How predictable," Anderson sighed. "Let's show them our new tricks." Rodriguez, start the music. Matthews, initiate the vent sequence. Hayes, target their command ship with our latest invention. The one we built from their own salvaged quantum torpedo and that food synthesizer. That's the one. Let's see how they handle a weapon that technically doesn't exist in this dimension. The ensuing battle would later be described in Council records as an exercise in controlled insanity, and in human records as Tuesday. The Thermopyla danced through space trailing artificial fire, its impossible weapons creating effects that caused several Varaxian tactical officers to require psychological counseling. When the smoke cleared and the last echoes of guitar solos faded from space, the enemy fleet had retreated in disarray, leaving behind plenty of salvage for Matthews and his engineering team to experiment with. You realize, Kelvor noted as he watched the humans eagerly collecting new pieces to modify, that everything you've done violates at least 15 fundamental laws of physics. Sure does, Anderson replied proudly. And those are just the laws we know about. Wait until you see what we're planning for tomorrow. The Council observer made a note in his report. Humans do not so much adapt to war as they force war to adapt to them. The Varaxians never stood a chance. No, you're thinking too logically, Lieutenant Rodriguez explained to the bewildered Xanthari weapons officer. The key to proper percussive maintenance is to hit it like it owes you money. The Thermopyla had become an impromptu training center for Council ships looking to adopt human combat techniques. Currently, Rodriguez was teaching a class on what she called advanced engineering psychology, known to humans as hitting things until they worked. But the manual specifically states, the Xanthari began. Manuals are more like guidelines, Rodriguez interrupted, hefting her favorite wrench. Watch and learn. She gave the malfunctioning console a precise strike, causing it to spring to life with better efficiency than before. The Xanthari's color patterns shifted through several shades of disbelief. That violated 23 safety protocols and 4 laws of maintenance. Yeah, but it works, Rodriguez grinned. And that's lesson 1 of human engineering. Results beat regulations. In the main hangar, Engineer Matthews supervised a different kind of chaos. Council engineers watched in horror as his team demonstrated their latest innovation, combining damaged shield generators with partially functional weapon systems to create what they called spicy defense bubbles. The real trick, Matthews explained while casually rerouting power through what appeared to be a modified coffee maker, is not asking whether you should, but asking what's the worst that could happen. Total molecular dissolution, a Council engineer suggested nervously. Exactly. And then we work our way up from there. On the bridge, Captain Anderson reviewed reports of other Council ships attempting to implement human tactics. The results were mixed but promising. The Xanthari cruiser Logical Progression had managed to turn their waste recycling system into an unexpectedly effective point defense grid. Meanwhile, the Vexthivorian battleship Protocol Prime had accidentally created what their captain described as a weapon that makes the enemy taste colors. Sir, Hayes called from Tactical, you need to see this. The Varaxians are adapting their formations. The main screen showed enemy fleet movements that had become increasingly erratic. After months of facing human chaos, the Varaxians had begun implementing their own versions of unpredictable tactics. They're learning, Anderson mused, but they're learning wrong. They're trying to calculate unpredictability. Isn't that a contradiction in terms, sir? Exactly. And that's why we're going to win. Park, show me the analysis of their new patterns. The sensor officer brought up a detailed display. They're attempting to mimic our seemingly random maneuvers, but they're doing it systematically. Their tactical computers are trying to generate controlled chaos using algorithms. Anderson's grin widened. In other words, they're trying to schedule spontaneity. Rodriguez, get me the Council command channel. The lieutenant's hands danced across her console, now decorated with what appeared to be racing stripes and flame decals. Channel open, sir, and I took the liberty of adding some background music. "This is Captain Anderson to all Council vessels," he announced as the opening riffs of "Welcome to the Jungle" played softly beneath his words. "The enemy is attempting to adapt to our tactics. They think they can calculate chaos. Let's show them why that doesn't work." Over the next hour, Anderson outlined what he called Operation Monkey Wrench, a battle plan that violated so many tactical principles that the Council's strategic AI had to be rebooted 3 times just to process it. "Remember," he concluded, "the key to human warfare isn't being unpredictable. It's being unpredictable about how you're being unpredictable." The resulting battle would be recorded in Council archives as the incident we agree never to discuss rationally. The Voraxian fleet, attempting to counter expected human chaos with calculated randomness, found themselves facing genuine human improvisation. When the Thermopylae triggered its gravity drive in reverse while broadcasting polka music and using modified tractor beams to play catch with enemy torpedoes, the Voraxian tactical computers experienced what could only be described as an existential crisis. As the enemy fleet retreated in disarray, Admiral Drake contacted the Thermopylae. "The Council's Tactical Advisory Board has reviewed your recent innovations," he announced, trying to hide his amusement. "They've created a new classification for human combat doctrine. Technically possible, but spiritually wrong." "We'll take that as a compliment," Anderson replied, watching his crew already salvaging debris for their next round of improvements. "The Voraxians thought they could quantify human chaos," Rodriguez added, brandishing her wrench. "They forgot the first rule of human warfare. If it looks stupid but works, it's not stupid." "They really shouldn't have followed us home," Captain Anderson remarked, watching the massive Voraxian fleet emerge from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. "Earth's defensive grid isn't exactly Council approved." Admiral Drake, now serving as humanity's military liaison to the Council, couldn't hide his grin. "You mean the system-wide network of weapons that officially doesn't exist?" "Oh, it exists," Anderson chuckled. "We just got creative with the definition of weapons. Lieutenant Rodriguez, initiate Operation Home Field Advantage." Throughout the solar system, dormant systems flickered to life. The Voraxian fleet's sensors detected nothing unusual at first, just a standard planetary defense grid, exactly where their intelligence suggested it would be. "They're proceeding exactly as expected," Hayes reported from Tactical, "following their standard invasion protocol." "Of course they are," Anderson nodded. "They still haven't figured out that humans don't do standard. Matthews, how's our first surprise coming along?" In the vast orbital shipyards around Mars, Engineer Matthews coordinated with ground control. "Solar mirrors aligned, sir. Ready to give them a light show they'll never forget." The Voraxian fleet's first indication that this wouldn't be a normal invasion came when the surface of Mars suddenly lit up like a supernova. Hundreds of orbital mirrors, officially listed as climate regulation equipment, redirected concentrated sunlight directly into their sensor arrays. "Voraxian fleet is experiencing multiple sensor failures," Hark announced with satisfaction. "Their formation is breaking up. Activating Phase 2. Phase 2 involved Jupiter's magnetosphere, or more specifically, what humanity had done to it. Over the years, engineers had installed what they called magnetic resonance enhancers throughout the gas giant's orbit, officially for scientific research. Releasing the magnetic pulse, Rodriguez called out, "Let's see how they handle a planet-sized EMP." The resulting electromagnetic storm caused several Voraxian ships to temporarily lose power, their carefully calculated formation dissolving into chaos. But humanity was just getting started. "Sir," Hayes reported with barely contained glee, "the automated defense platforms are in position. Permission to initiate the asteroid ballet." Anderson nodded. "Show them why humans love dancing." Throughout the asteroid belt, thousands of small automated platforms activated. Each one was officially registered as a mining assistance drone. None of them were mentioned to have gravity manipulation capabilities or to be programmed with classical dance movements. The Varaxian fleet watched in horror as chunks of the asteroid belt began moving in what appeared to be a choreographed waltz, creating a deadly dance of space rocks that their tactical computers couldn't predict. They're attempting to calculate safe passages through the asteroid field, Park noted. Their computers are trying to find patterns in the movement. That's cute, Rodriguez smirked. Should we tell them the patterns are based on 20th century disco moves? The Thermopylae led a squadron of Earth's most advanced ships through the chaos, each vessel demonstrating why human military doctrine couldn't be quantified. The Varaxians found themselves facing ships that used their own damage as weapons, converted their engine exhaust into offensive capabilities, and seemed to treat the laws of physics more like polite suggestions. Sir, Park's voice carried a note of excitement. They're approaching the Venus defense grid. Perfect. Anderson's grin turned predatory. Lieutenant Rodriguez, time to show them why we spent so much time studying our own planet's extreme environments. The surface of Venus erupted as hidden facilities, built to withstand the planet's harsh conditions, launched salvos of plasma directly harvested from the planet's atmosphere. The Varaxian fleet's thermal shields, designed for normal space combat, proved inadequate against weapons forged in an environment hot enough to melt lead. They're retreating toward the outer system, Hayes reported, moving right into position for Operation Solar Wind. Anderson finished. Matthews, please demonstrate why humans are the only species crazy enough to build a Dyson ring. The partial Dyson ring around the sun, officially listed as a solar observation network, powered up. Concentrated streams of solar plasma, guided by magnetic fields that shouldn't have been possible to control, lashed out at the retreating Varaxian ships. Message incoming from the Varaxian command ship, Rodriguez announced. Text only. It just says, "What are you?" Anderson laughed. Send them our standard response. We're human. We break things until they work our way. The Varaxian fleet's retreat marked the first time in recorded history that an invasion force fled while filing an official protest about violations of rational combat doctrine. The Council's observation team, watching from a safe distance, began updating their species classification protocols. Under humans, they added a new warning: do not invade their home system. They've had too much time to get creative. The Galactic Council's Grand Chamber had changed significantly since the war began. Where once pristine order had reigned, now there were scattered repair patches that showed signs of human optimization. The crystalline dome bore scorch marks from what Engineer Matthews had called an improvement in ventilation efficiency. Captain Anderson stood before the council, his dress uniform adorned with medals that technically didn't exist for achievements that officially never happened. Behind him, the crew of the Thermopylae tried their best to look professional, though Rodriguez was clearly itching to upgrade something in the chamber's ancient architecture. The Varaxian Empire has surrendered, High Counselor Vexthorian announced, his tentacles forming patterns of mixed relief and concern. Their official statement cites unprecedented violations of rational combat and spiritual damage to our tactical computers as primary reasons. In other words, Anderson grinned, we drove them crazy. That is one interpretation. The High Counselor agreed, though arcsynopsychologists prefer the term induced strategic existential crisis. This brings us to our current situation. The main display activated, showing footage from across Council space. Council ships performed maneuvers that would have been considered heretical just months ago. Engineering teams proudly demonstrated modifications that combined alien technology with what they'd learned from humans. One particularly enthusiastic Zenthuri crew had even started playing Earth music during battle drills. You haven't just changed warfare, Admiral Drake observed. You've changed how the entire galaxy thinks about problem solving. The Council has therefore made two significant decisions, Vexthorian continued. First, humanity is hereby granted full membership status, with all rights and privileges thereof, even though we break all your rules. Rodriguez couldn't help asking. Especially because you break all our rules, the High Counselor replied. Which brings us to our second decision. The thermopilot will become a training vessel, teaching council crews the art of human innovation. Matthews perked up. Does this mean we get a bigger budget for experimental modifications? Within reason, Drake cautioned, though his smile suggested he knew reason had become a flexible concept. The council's decision led to immediate changes. The Thermopila's first training crews produced results that redefined several laws of physics and led to the creation of 3 new emergency protocols. Lieutenant Rodriguez's introduction to creative engineering became the most popular and feared course in the council's military academy. Remember, she would tell her terrified students, if you're not at least a little worried about what you're building, you're not being creative enough. Captain Anderson's combat doctrine, originally titled Winging It with Style, was officially published as Adaptive Tactical Innovation in Modern Warfare. The Council added 17 warning labels and required all readers to sign a waiver acknowledging that reality was more flexible than previously assumed. Even the Varaxians began to change. Their surrender terms included a request for human instructors to teach their engineers acceptable levels of controlled insanity. Their first attempt at human-style modifications resulted in a ship that could technically travel backwards in time, but only on Tuesdays. You know what the best part is. Anderson remarked to Drake as they watched a council training squadron attempt their first chaos maneuver formation. They're not just copying us anymore. They're starting to innovate in their own ways. He was right. The Zenthari had developed a targeting system based on quantum uncertainty and statistical anomalies. The Vexthorians had created shields that violated conservation of energy in aesthetically pleasing ways. Even the Council's strategic AI had developed a sense of humor, though its jokes tended to involve multidimensional mathematics. The galaxy's changing, Drake agreed. The old rules don't apply anymore. Rules, Anderson chuckled, watching Rodriguez teach a group of alien engineers the fine art of percussive maintenance, are just guidelines waiting to be creatively reinterpreted. The Thermopila itself became a legend, its ever-evolving modifications a testament to human ingenuity. The ship's registry now included a special note: configuration subject to change without notice, reason, or regard for conventional physics. As for humanity's reputation, the Council added a new classification to their species database: humans, a species that treats the impossible as a personal challenge. Approach with caution, curiosity, and an open mind. Warning: their solutions may cause temporary breaks in reality, permanent changes to established principles, and occasional violations of fundamental cosmic laws. Best known for turning defeats into victories and problems into opportunities, usually in ways that give safety inspectors nervous breakdowns. Note: if they say watch this, prepare to update the laws of physics.